Welcome to the Personal Development Essentials podcast. And I am delighted to be joined today by my very good friend and mentor, Mr. Kam Johal. Now, he is an award-winning entrepreneur. He's got a really interesting story. He came to the UK from India when he was 10 years old, got a real kind of taste and passion for business. He's kind of built and sold multiple businesses. He's also a mentor for the Prince's Trust. He created Leicester's #1 estate agency, the IPS, and today he is also the founder of the Property Professionals Association. But he's also, he's a very spiritual man. He's a Sikh as well, and he's at a really interesting time in his life where he is driven not really by money anymore. I mean, of course, money is always nice, but it's more about impact. And I always love our conversations. They're always a source of inspiration to me. And what we wanted to do on this podcast, as you know, Kam, it's helping people bridge the gap between where they are and where they want to get to, is just if we can distill some little bits of your worldly wisdom for our listeners. So what I wanted to kind of start with was actually something you mentioned on the phone to me the other day. It was the, if you don't mind sharing, it was the candle thing. What was that wonderful thing you said? It was all about impact and paying it forward.
Yeah, really interesting, Paul. I went to a meeting last week and I get invited to lots and lots of business opportunity type things. So a very dear friend of mine invited me to London and he told the story about light someone's candle. And he said, imagine, if you will, a room full of people, and each one of those people are handed a candle. It's not lit, and they turn the lights out. There's no windows to this room at all. So obviously it's pitch black and you can't see anything. But from the other side of the room, a door opens and one person walks in with a lit candle. And so we don't know what's going on, what's happening in this room. So he walks up and obviously he's got light to see his path and whatever it is that he wants to do. And he could quite happily keep that light to himself. But instead of doing that, he comes and lights the candle of the guy next to him and says, pay it forward. So he lights the next one, she lights the next one, etc., etc. And soon the whole of this room has everybody holding candles that are lit. Now, the moral of the story is that we can keep our own candle lit for ourselves and keep everything to ourselves. But the sum of the parts is that obviously the whole room is now lit, and that one individual with that one candle has much better light than he or she would have done had they kept their light to themselves. So the phrase, light someone's candle really struck a chord with me, to the point where I immediately got on my phone and thought, can I register this as a domain name? And it was available. And never one to sit around without taking action. But it was a wonderful story, and it really epitomizes what we get when we actually share the resources that we have, that we ourselves benefit. If you come from a scarcity mentality and you think that you need to hold on to things, it's totally wrong. And that's what that story taught me and reiterated what I believed for a long, long time.
I absolutely love that, because even listening, I almost get kind of tingles now listening to it. Because that's what the Personal Development Essentials podcast is all about. And certainly me and Aggie, we joke, we say it's therapy for us, but at the same time, it's about documenting and sharing our struggles and triumphs with other people. Because I always say to people, never underestimate the effect and the impact you can have even on one person. And if you can do that for one person, even if you can do that every day, you're quite right. Because when you keep it to yourself, when you're operating from a scarcity mindset, it's really unfulfilling. And I've been there in life and business when I've just been purely focused on the numbers, and it's hollow and you can't keep doing it. It's like Tony Robbins says, the science of success, and there are structures and strategies of doing that, but there's the art of fulfillment. And this is why I certainly find everything about you at the moment and the time of life you're at, it's all about kind of giving back helping people with education, certainly through the Property Professionals Association and so on, because you believe very passionately in imparting these principles of life and business to other people. And
look, sorry,
go
on, Paul.
No,
I was going to say, look, Paul, I've been very fortunate because I have, and I had some really good contacts, mentors, family members that would do this for me. And, you know, we've kind of lost the art of conversation almost. You know, last year, I think it was, that we sent more text messages than telephone calls. So I think that I'm doing something that's necessary, because we don't all have people that we have access to. You know, back in the day, we used to have the wise old man or the wise old lady in the little villages that we lived in, and they knew everything. And they passed it on from generation to generation. But that chain's been broken now. So I feel that I'm at an age in my life where, you know, I've done what I want to do. My children are grown up, both of them are working. And so now it's a time for me to really give some of that knowledge back to those that desire it.
Beautiful.
Kam, I want to welcome you as well, and it's a real pleasure and a privilege to have you here on the podcast.
Good to be here.
Thank you. I liked that story with the candle, and I think one other thing about when you light someone else's candle is that your flame does not diminish at all. So you can light as many candles with your flame. And I also like you have a quote on your Facebook page by Zig Ziglar, which I'll read it. You can have anything you want as long as you help enough people get what they want. So I just wanted your thoughts on that. And then if you don't mind giving us a brief background of who you are and your journey into becoming the person that you are.
Well, it's on my Facebook page, obviously, for a reason, because I'm very passionate, and I've been in self-development in terms of the receiving end of it for probably about 30 years. I went to America in 1993 and bought a book back called The Wealthy Barber. And unfortunately, one of my friends stole it and didn't give it back. But and I've been reading and buying books ever since. So, you know, the thing about helping other people is that, you know, the real rewards that you actually get in life is by giving. And then it comes back to you tenfold. So the receiving of presents is really nice when you're a kid. But when you're an adult, the giving of presents is the thing that really is, that impacts on me. So I've spent a lot of time with my twins to the point where, you know, my wife went back to work when they were very, very young. I used to work from home. So for the first couple of years, I had sort of like half a day with my children, which seemed like a chore at the time. But today it's a real privilege in how close I am with those two, because that bonding took place not just with you know, my wife, and at the time, that would be the person that would be staying at home looking after them. But, you know, our domestic situation was such that I could help out, and it's a great thing. So to see their reactions when we're actually giving them things is far better than receiving anything. And then the second thing you asked me was about my journey. You know, I rocked up here when I was 10 years old, and the world was very different then, you know, and then discrimination and racial abuse was rife, and it was accepted, more or less. So that kind of happened on a daily basis. And I couldn't speak the language. I only knew the alphabet when I rocked up here. And then, so the first few years were really difficult. And they were even more difficult because, you know, I wasn't stupid. I just couldn't communicate. So there was a kind of a frustration that somebody that maybe can't speak very well or is impartial, can't hear properly, et cetera, et cetera. It felt like a disability, that everything was going on in my head that was perfect, but yeah, I couldn't communicate it out, and people around me, including my teachers, thought that was stupid. But, you know, I was very fortunate. I had a childminder, Maury O'Brien, and her daughter, Karen, who I regard as my sister today. And I picked up English really, really quickly. And I used to go and watch Leicester City play with Ginger, go and sit on the cop wall with a Leicester City scarf around me. So, things really improved very, very quickly. But English was still my second language, and things were difficult. And I was advised by my then careers teacher to leave school at 16, which I did. I did an apprenticeship in engineering, which was a very big thing at that time. And you sort of get a trade and everything will be hunky-dory, which my parents really encouraged me to go into. But I hated every single minute of it because I knew inside me that there was something else that I wanted. I didn't know what it was. We had one family friend who was in business, and he became my best friend. And in fact, I actually worked for him for free for about 3 months. And from there on, I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. But you know what? This is what happens. We're young, so I listened to my parents, and I did 4 years of an engineering apprenticeship that I absolutely hated. But even then, I excelled at it. I became Apprentice of the Year in my second year out of 120 apprentices. My dad and I got to go down to the Holiday Inn and receive a prize, which is great. And but I quit the day I qualified, and so there was a bit of uproar about that. But I knew I wanted to do other things. So I went to college for a couple of years. Then I moved to London, but still there was this nagging desire to have my own business. And so by that time, I'd met my wife, moved back to Leicester, came and settled. And then as soon as I got married, I started my own enterprise, which was going to propel me to my millions, as it were. And that was, I started out as a market trader. I bought a Ford Transit van for £1,000, and I bought some stock. And that's what it was. I did that part-time for about a year whilst I was working full-time. I did it on Fridays and Sundays because I used to work on a Saturday. But in that 12 months, I'd got enough money to go into it full-time. And that began my business career, which is coming up to about 30 years now.
Do you think that gave you like a really good grounding in terms of business basics, being a market trader?
No. No. You go and set up in the morning, freezing cold, or it's raining, and you hope you obviously pay your rent on the day, and then you take the cash.
Yeah.
And the problem is cash seems really good because I was 24 at the time. So coming home with £400, £500, £600, it was great. But I wasn't building a business. I wasn't doing anything. But, it was good after having nothing for whatever time that I'd been in. But as far as business principles went, that wasn't teaching me anything.
And so from then on, how soon until you started with your own estate agency? What was the transition there?
It came quite a bit later than that, Paul. So after that, I transitioned from having my market stall to eventually having 4 retail fashion shops. And so by about 26, 27, I was turning over my first £1 million a year, which I read, if you look at any of the books, etc., that document things. So people like Richard Branson and the like, they kind of reached their first £1 million in sales at those kind of ages. And so I reached that, and I thought, things are here now. And I was learning about business, and I started educating myself. And we were turning over a great deal of money, especially for me at that time, because we hadn't seen any money. My wife and I, we don't come from money. We're working class families, and our parents are working class people. So things seemed really good. And, the recession came through in the early 90s, interest rates hit to 15% for a few days, and sales halved overnight. And that was it. We were wiped out because I hadn't learned the principles of business. So we had nothing in reserve. Every time we had any money, we opened another shop. And of course, the idea was I would have 40 shops and 100 shops and all the rest of it. But, the world had other ideas, and we just were not prepared for external factors that could affect a business. And that probably, Paul, was probably the biggest lesson in business that I've had. That you need time to get through the rough times. So when things are good, you need to be putting something away for when things will inevitably be bad one day.
Yeah.
Right. The sun doesn't shine every day, does it?
I love that, because actually that leads nicely on to. I was going to ask you about have there been any significant failures that you've learned a great deal from? So I take it that was almost like a baptism of fire for you.
Well, it virtually wiped me out. So I, again, not knowing the principles of business, I had a limited company, and I made the mistake because all of my suppliers were known to me. You have relationships. So I paid all of my suppliers. And because obviously I was interacting with them and I wanted to carry on in some kind of business and not have a bad reputation, that I totally forgot that I had a limited company. I was not obligated to pay any of those people, but the one person that I was obligated to pay was the bank, because I had an overdraft that was secured against my personal house. And of course, I paid all these people, then I've got no money left, and the bank simply says, "Mr. Johal, where's our money?" And I thought, oh my God. And that was a very important lesson. You know, if you talk to me now about limited companies, I can tell you most accountants can, right? And who you should settle and which liabilities. So, but you know what? I worked with my bank, and I kept my head down. I sold my car. My wife went back to work. And for about 2.5 years, I went back to being a market trader. I got rid of all my shops. But the nice thing about having a lot of shops was we had a lot of stock. So it didn't matter whether I was making any money because I paid for the stock. So that kept me going cash flow wise. And I realized that I needed to do something else, that this wasn't my kind of life. Having shops, trading, these kind of goods was not something for me. But it gave me 2 or 3 years to contemplate really of what I wanted to do next. But we were expecting our twins at the time. So, you know, and a friend of mine said to me, "Kam, why don't you go into insurance?" So I just laughed, you know, thinking of this guy that knocks on the door. And he tried to do it and got sacked after 6 months. So I said, "You know, what the hell are you talking about? You couldn't do it." And he said, no, listen to me. He said, "I've learned enough to know that it wasn't for me, but I think you do really well at it." And Paul, within our community, people would start asking me to do various things for them in terms of, you know, talk to banks and things, because language is still a difficulty at that back in then. And my own parents, I handled a lot of their affairs in terms of paperwork and talking to banks and mortgage companies, etc. And so I started thinking about it. And, you know, again, being an action taker, the day he said this to me, I went out, bought the local paper, found a job in insurance, and went for an interview that day. And over the next 2-3 weeks, I actually got the job. And so I was going to get a company car. And bear in mind, I'm on my ass right now, excuse the phrase. They're going to give me a company car and a salary, and I turned the job down. So my wife said, "Are you mad?" I said, "Look, I know a little bit about financial services and insurance companies, etc. And even I haven't heard of this company. But the thing is that I really haven't been for an interview for 10, 15 years. So I needed to really know, can I actually go and get something?" And I can. So now this is something that I'm going to pursue. And eventually, about 6 months later, I joined a company. And that time, the FCA, it was called the FSA at the time, had regulated the business of investment advice. And so I had to sit my exam. So for a year, I worked for this company, servicing existing clients, whilst I took my financial services exam. So I became qualified as a financial advisor. So that was a tough year again, because now I didn't have my business, and I earned very, very little money during that time. But when I qualified, and I'd spent a year in that job, and I kind of really took off, and it was really my forte, that field. And I spent 3 years with that company, and I spent 3 years as an independent financial advisor, being self-employed again, which was great. And that really, those 6 years really gave me so many of the contacts that I would actually work with in the future. And I still work with them today, 20 odd years later. And we have made so much money that I've lost count. We've also lost a lot of money, it's not all upside. And when I say we've made a lot of money, there's a lot of people that made a lot of money. It's not just me. When people talk about me, myself, and I think it's the wrong phrase. It's always a team of people that gets you there. You might be the front man, and I've been the front man a lot of times, but that's what's helped me an awful lot is good contacts. And of course, once I bought that book, I got the buzz for reading books. So I actually have a small, so don't think that, you know, it's this grandiose. I actually have a small library upstairs in my home right now, probably about 300, maybe 400 books there. And I've read every single one.
Fantastic. And the first one was The Wealthy Barber. And who was the author of that? Do you remember?
I have no idea. I'm sure you're the sort of person that knows things like that.
Do you know, that's one I haven't actually heard of. So that was why I wanted to get the author of that one. No, I'm impressed.
It came from the US. I bought it in California. And
okay.
And I had it on my shelf. And if he's ever listening to this, Ian Sneath took that book. And he's the one that's got it.
Give it back, you bugger.
Yeah, give it back.
And actually, that kind of leads me on nicely, because whenever we talk, and certainly when I've heard you talk at the PPA, Property Professionals Association, you really hammer home business basics, and especially things like mindset. So obviously you've worked a lot on your own mindset with your own education and so on. And it seems to me that so many people want to try to be able to run before they can walk. And actually mindset very often it's a cornerstone of any kind of successful business, because being an entrepreneur, being a business owner, what I always tell people is, if you'd have told me the shocks I would have had, you know, making good money, losing money, you know, it's like a roller coaster. You need to develop a hell of a lot of resilience. And that was, I kind of went into it blindly, I guess, went into business blindly, thinking it was all going to be a breeze and just expected things to grow, suffered a few massive shocks similar to yourself. And that's what got me to kind of deep dive into mindset. And if you had to kind of give anyone any kind of advice to anyone wanting to start a business or anything like that, what would generally be the first kind of things you'd say to people?
I'd say there's a story about Einstein when he was asked, what would you do if you had an hour to save the world? And there's variations, obviously, as stories get, you know, they change. But we wanted the essence of the story. So the version that I have, he says, I would spend 59 minutes planning how to save the world and 1 minute implementing it. The problem with being in business and starting off, we have all this enthusiasm. I've got this great idea. And then, you know, and 97% of those ideas of those businesses are gone within 3 years. Probably about 90% of them gone in a year. You know, I remember one of our IPS companies celebrating our 10th anniversary. And, you know, there's only 1 or 2% of businesses that are alive after 10 years. And, you know, what do I put that down to now? You know, why are some of my businesses, my early businesses, really failed? You know, there's a famous saying, begin with the end in mind. So look at where you're going to take it. But, you know, the problem that we have is the same you turns up to every one of these situations. So if you failed in the first one, you have a blueprint now for failure. Now you have to get conscious about that. And you have to think, you know what? I did those things and it failed. So I've got to make sure now that I don't do those things. You know, as I think it's either Zig Ziglar or Brian Tracy said, it's a shame we don't pay failures, because we could then go and listen to them and think, and I think the phrase was something like, hey, you know, what's a good looking bloke like you doing, failing for the last 20 years? Tell us what you've been doing wrong. But we don't pay those people, so we don't get to hear about it, right? So, you know, the thing is, so the mindset, you know, I call it state, right? That is the software that runs your life. It's in between these two ears of yours. And, you know, perception is reality. So whatever you believe, doesn't matter how big the lie is, that's your reality, isn't it? No matter what the world says outside. So, you know, if you don't sort that out first, then nothing will work for you. You will make the same mistakes over and over and over again. And I've done that. You know, when I look back, you think, why did you do that again? Because this wasn't trained properly. You know,
I'm just nodding in agreement, thinking of all of my own failures, the painful lessons of doing.
but we do though, Paul, don't we? We do
Yeah.
it over and over and over. And then it's like, oh, I'm always doing that. No, you failed 3 times. You don't always do it, right?
Yeah.
But the pain is then admitting that you're wrong.
Mm.
You know, and I think that, you know, taking responsibility for every one of your actions, not just the ones that work out for you. Because if you take responsibility, I mean, these are my beliefs, by the way. So there's no scientific, these are my 30 years. So I'm not preaching to anybody. This is what I've learned. And if your listeners like it, great. If they don't like it, throw it away. Think, you know what, that Kam is an idiot. That's fine. I don't care. My bank balance is not affected either way, right? So, you know, the thing is that if you take responsibility, and it's like apologizing for your mistake. You know, some people just refuse to do that. And we're coming up, more and more people are doing that because we see a lot of angry and very kind of in-your-face people on reality TV. And we think it's okay to behave like that. But the problem with that for me is if I don't admit my mistake, then I'm not sending a signal to my brain to say, oi, you effed this up. So next time that situation comes, my brain's got no reference point, has it? It can't think, Kam, we did that last time. This was the result. Let's not do that again. Because we just didn't stop and admit that. So if you take responsibility for everything in your life, then nobody else has to. Right?
There's so much in there. I always take lots of notes because there's, for anyone listening, there's a lot of parallels between your thinking there and people like Ray Dalio, Sam Ovens, all taking total ownership and responsibility of all of your beliefs, thoughts, and actions, because ultimately you own everything in your reality. But one thing Ray Dalio says is pain plus reflection equals progress. And just the way you were gesturing there, like that feedback loop, made a mistake, pain, what am I going to do? Change.
Don't do it again.
Yeah. You know, and that's Ray, because I love the Ray Dalio kind of feedback loop. It's so simple, and it's a loop. And it's like most people do this in their lives. They have this sense of identity, and their beliefs and behaviors are the same. They keep doing the same things. They keep getting the same things, and they just do this, even keeled throughout their entire life. You get some people go on a downward spiral. They blame everything in the external world and, oh, it's not my fault, it's everyone else's fault, and blah, blah, blah. And they just go on a downward spiral. But then certainly exponential entrepreneurs and people who almost, they kind of, what's the word I'm going to, it's taking that higher level, zooming down on your life and being able to really steer it the direction you want to go. And that enables people to have these upward cycles. You still fail constantly, but you shoot up. And actually, it reminds me, there was a great interview. The interviewer was a bit of an idiot, but he was interviewing Elon Musk. And he was turning around to Elon Musk saying, don't you think it's about time you just quit now? And Elon Musk is like, no, never. And I'm like, these people don't get it. You know, failure is part of the process. You've got to build up that emotional resiliency every time you move forward in life and in business. But yeah, no, I just wanted to kind of dissect some of those because I was thinking of all these parallels with all these other thinkers. So no, that's fantastic.
Yeah, Paul, I take a lot from sport. So I'm an avid fan of Formula One and football. So if you look at the greatest penalty takers or the greatest free kick takers, you know, and you know, David Beckham was one of those that really perfected the art of taking the free kick. And but if you actually watched all his free kicks, you know, one after the other, you would realize that he failed probably 6 or 7 times out of 10, you know. And Michael Jordan talks about it, doesn't he? You know, how many shots you have to take, and the fact that, you know, every shot that you don't take is the one that you're definitely going to miss, isn't it? So I think whoever you talk to, if anybody's business career or any type of career that spans, you know, 10, 15, 20 years, they will tell you that they failed a damn sight more than they ever succeeded, right? But then they learned from those failures. So my early, they say, I think Will Smith says it quite a lot, fail fast, fail first, or something like this, right? So my early failures, my total failure as a market trader amounted to about £30,000 worth of debt. But I've had other failures when we owed £1 million, and this happened, and it was like the figures were astronomical to, anybody that's used to normal types of stuff. So, these things happen in life, but acknowledging them is the key. But at the same time, celebrate your wins as well. It works both ways. So, but if you don't ever acknowledge failure or that I made a mistake, and failure doesn't last forever, does it? Right? So when I first started as a financial advisor, I'd go and see a client and totally mess it up. And you think, oh shit, what the hell did you say that for? And there's a moment in that meeting when it's gone. You're not going to get that sale. Nobody has to say anything. This is gone. But you know what I used to do? I used to go back, sit in my car, and think, right, the next client doesn't know you messed this bit up, right? So you get a chance to practice it all over again. But without acknowledging the mistake, you'd never course correct, would you?
Love that.
And that was the key for me.
That's fantastic. Kam, I'll ask something similar in terms of mindset, because you teach about property investing. What I wanted to ask is, I'm sure you know very well that there are many people that attend and learn about property investing, and many of them spend thousands of pounds on attending boot camps, courses, things like that, and yet they don't do anything about that. Why, in your opinion, is that? Is it something that, what is the missing ingredient?
I mean, it's not understood. I don't understand that right now, but I think I'm beginning to get to that. So the same reason that 90% of people that are members of a gym don't actually attend, because it gives you a good feeling, because you can now tell your mind you're doing something. Yeah, it's the same as people that buy the book on diet, and the diet is always going to start on Monday, isn't it? Yeah, it's going to start on Monday. So now they can have a blowout over the weekend, can't they? But I think the part is that what we're doing is, and I've done it, and I have lots of things that I've bought that I've not used and worked with, because going on a property course, joining a gym, buying a book on diet gives you a really good feeling, doesn't it? Right? Now you're going to finally start. But the fact is, the pain starts the minute you start, doesn't it? Right? So now you get to Monday morning, or you get first time in the gym, and those machines and that book, it's difficult, isn't it? So now you're suddenly conscious, aren't you? It's a four stages of consciousness. Now you suddenly realize how much work is involved. And lots of entrepreneurs will tell you that, if I knew how much work is involved, maybe I wouldn't have done it. Right? So I started looking at what I was going to do. So it's a year ago today that I sold my estate agency lettings business, from a point of view of handover. So tomorrow is a year, if you like, of me having done that. And then, so soon as I handed that over on the 31st of October last year, 2nd of November, I went to America for 2 weeks with my wife. And so we had a couple of weeks with the family out there, which was great. And so now, sort of January, February time, I started thinking, what shall I do? And I came upon this idea of doing property education. But you know what? Sitting back, so almost after a year, it is so difficult. And I hadn't started a business for probably 10 years prior to that. And I'm realizing now, because there's such a big gap, and it's a different brand and it's a different idea. So I haven't got the office, I haven't got workers, employees that are there to do these things. So I'm doing this really lean operation, which is what I think you need to do today. You don't need any of the stuff that I had. I realized how difficult it is. And if I didn't know where this is going to end up in 10 years, sometimes I would have quit because I don't need the money to do it. So that's not a driving factor for me. I don't need it for my ego because I've proved whatever I need to do in life. And, my success is my family and my children. So I don't need that documenting anywhere. I know what these guys are doing and what they're capable of. But so going on the property course makes people feel good. They think they're doing something. Mm-hmm. Handing over the money, money, there has to be a monetary exchange for the information that you're receiving, especially if you're going to learn to implement things. And then, but again, when you're in that classroom setting, when you're in that hotel, then you've got to come back, and the real work is behind the scenes. Just like you see that swan gliding across that water, you don't see it paddling like crazy underneath. So, just like a footballer, he practices all week long. They rock up at 10 o'clock in the morning, leave at 4, they kick a ball around, and all the rest of it. So when you're seeing those amazing penalties, you're seeing those amazing free kicks, they've been practiced thousands of times. But you know what? They don't put that on Facebook. Yeah, there's no movies about those. They're done in private, right? You see, and you achieve success in public for what you do in private. And that's it. And I think people sometimes don't quite get that. Going to the course isn't going to get you success in your business.
And I know lots of people who buy course after course after course, and their heads are all over the place, and you try and pin them down and say, what have you done? What's your plan? What have you done? And they can't give you an answer. And that's why I think it's really interesting, your whole approach with the PPA. You give people such a firm grounding in business basics. It's not just the fancy stuff and all the property strategies. You're like, look, you need to learn this stuff first. You need to treat this like a proper business. You need to do the work. And that's the firm foundation upon which everything else is built.
Absolutely, Paul. If you go, I use another metaphor that, if the house that you live in, whether you rent it or whether it's a flat, when it was built, the last thing that happened was you saw the house being built. Yeah, somebody bought the land. They went and did the planning. Before they did the planning, every bit of that house was drawn out by an architect. Brick by brick, window by window, door by door handle by door handle. Nobody saw that. As I was saying to Aggie just now, nobody sees that. That's done in private. So then finally, when they've got planning permission, they flatten the land. And what do they do first? Do they build up? No, they don't. They build down. That's the foundations. They dig trenches to stand this house upon. So they start digging down. They start putting the foundations, those blue bricks, down, and you don't see anything. So if you were looking at ground level, you wouldn't see anything, would you? Nothing visible of that house. Once the foundations are laid, it goes up very quickly. And that's what business is like, and that's what life is like. Anything that you tackle, there'll be nothing to show for it for a while. And I'm trying to demonstrate to people, look, these are my experiences. The reason my £1 million a year business fell over is because we hadn't put enough away to get through the bad times. Did everybody's business fail? No, they didn't. A lot of people's businesses failed. A lot of people that were undercapitalized and under-resourced and under this and under this. But you know what? They were unprepared, right? Today, my children do it. I do it. Every penny that the PPA takes in, 10% is put to one side and never touched. Right? My children's salaries, 10% is put away, never touched. Because you know what? Doesn't matter how sunny, how hot, how beautiful it is. Yeah. It always rains after that. Yeah. And that's what happens. Night follows day. Yeah. Boom follows bust. So, I went bust in that situation when we had the first recession. I've ridden through the last 2 or 3 recessions. I'm waiting for the next one, as I've said often at the PPA. I've now sold some property. I've got a little cash pile of my own because I don't have any business partners in this business. So to take advantage of opportunities that arise when the downturn comes. When is it coming? I don't know. How long is it going to last? I have no idea. But is it going to come? Yes. It's not if, it's just when. So that's experience. And I want to impart that if I can for those that want it. And maybe it'll cause them just a little less pain. And if it alleviates that for them, then you know what? I've done my job. Or whether it's property or whether it's any other business, because the fundamentals of business are exactly the same. Doesn't matter what you apply them to.
That's fantastic. Brilliant.
Absolutely.
And would you say now, because obviously in terms of what's driving you now is more about legacy and impact, does your faith as a Sikh play into a lot of your kind of current thinking now in terms of the impact and the lighting a candle, like we said?
Yeah, much more so, Paul. You have stages in your life, and I'm not a practicing Sikh, but my beliefs yes, I am a Sikh, but if I was a Christian or a Muslim, it'd be exactly the same, because there isn't a religion on this earth that says harm other people. There isn't a religion that says steal off other people. Yeah. So, the fundamentals of religion are, tied in with the morals of a human being, aren't they? Sikhism is the religion that I am of. It's 550 years old this year. So it's a very modern religion. Within the scriptures, man and woman are created equal. That is given, and equality is given to women. Within that religion, which I'm really, really pleased about. And so, the fundamentals of that is be a good human being. So you don't have to go to a gurudwara or a church or a mosque to be a good human being. And that's really where I feel very privileged, Paul. My immigrant surroundings have never left me. I still think like an immigrant. I still see opportunity everywhere. I'll go back to India. I was there, as you know, a few weeks ago. And, you see how hard things really are, how tough it really is, to have nothing. We have a welfare system. We have, we have the National Health Service. We never, you go to a hospital in India, they'll say, please deposit this much money, right? So as you know, I had some tests done because I had some health issues. And so as soon as you've seen the doctor, you then go and pay for the doctor. So his secretary collects the bill. Then you need some treatment. So before you go for the treatment, you queue up and pay. And if you need anything else that they haven't charged you for, so I had some tests done at 2 different hospitals. I must have paid on 6 or 7 different occasions. But you know what? I went to see my GP yesterday. We had a 30-minute chat. He gave me a prescription, nothing to pay. No worry, obviously I've got to pay for my prescription, but a 30-minute chat with a doctor, imagine what that would actually cost in the private sector. And I've done that, I've consulted privately. That would be £150 consultation and sometimes more. So, I see how fortunate we really are, living in, I think the best country in the world. And so I dislike people that try and knock any country that they live in, because they're quite free to go and move into the one that they think's great, aren't they? But by our own nature, sometimes we just like to have a good moan. But that's a story for another day, isn't it?
Yeah, that's interesting. Actually, what in terms of touching on the elements of your kind of faith and the period of life that you're in now, there's a wonderful phrase. I'm sure you've heard of Joe Polish, the guy who set up the Genius Network and podcast I Love Marketing. He says life gives to the givers. And actually, yes. I think I'm a big believer in karma. And I think that, not only as individuals, but as businesses, we're all part of this wider system, this interconnected kind of web of humanity. And when you kind of, like Zig Ziglar says, if you find out what enough people want and you give it to them, then you can have everything you want. It's switching from being purely selfish to service. But I think that comes with age and maturity, and it's part of an evolutionary kind of journey, the hero's journey, dare I say, that we all have. And it's whether you're religious or spiritual or even a kind of humanitarian in business, people kind of reach these similar conclusions. So I think that's really fascinating, your whole kind of philosophy. And this is what I really wanted to dissect and distill on this podcast. And I think we've done it. I think we've only touched the surface, because I know there is a fountain of knowledge there. And Aggie, is there anything else you wanted to ask?
Kam, yes, a couple of quick fire questions, if I may. Let's say you had the opportunity to go back in time and meet your 20-year-old self. So what's the one piece of advice you would give him?
I would say you can get rich slowly. Don't be in such a hurry.
Like that. And a quick question from me. Do you have any top 1 to 3 books that you'd like to recommend to our listeners? Favorites of yours?
Favorites might, well, they change, don't they? So, if I was to say 3 books, I would say Think and Grow Rich.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's The Richest Man in Babylon.
Fantastic.
Might be the wealthiest.
Yeah.
It's one of those. And then I think I would read Tony Robbins' Awaken the Giant Within.
Absolute classics.
Solid recommendations there.
Yeah.
No, brilliant. Is there anything else you want? I think we can wrap up in just a moment. Is there anything else you want to ask Aggie?
Just one last question for me then, Kam. Let's say you have a magic wand and you can change something in the world as it is today. Anything. What would that be?
I think I would get rid of global warming.
Nice.
That would be my gift to the world today, because we're facing such extreme problems in the future, and we've really in some aspects have laid a path of nails for our future generations to be stepping on. And I don't know what the implications of global warming are going to be, because they're going to be different in different parts of the world. But world leaders today are too busy trying to get elected. And short-term thinking, and that's what I think stops us. How do you get a prime minister or a president that's voted in every 4 years to think of the next 20 years or 30 years or 40 years? We've now got some very young people making big noises about us not of doing exactly that, creating problems for them in our own lives. And I think if we can get together and resolve that problem amongst many others, then we would have a better world for the future.
Brilliant.
Fantastic.
Thank you so much. That's great.
You're welcome.
Brilliant. And without there's actually loads more going on in my head, but actually I think we could even do a part 2 at some point, because I know if I start going down these rabbit holes, we could be here for another hour. But I certainly I want to thank you so much for joining us today, Kam. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I'm really looking forward to our next chat.
Why not?
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Aggie. Take care, guys. Thanks for having me.
See ya.
Enjoy yourself. Bye-bye.
Thank you.